glad you could join us tonight. We have a fantastic webinar lined up tonight. I have Scot Faulkner, and Scot Faulkner is from West Virginia. At one point in his life, earlier on, he served in the U.S. government and was working within the White House. And at this point in time in his life, he's been very involved in helping PBM to move forward through different organizations. In particular, we're talking a really neat organization called PBM Foundation.org, and he'll tell us a little bit more about that. But right now, I want to mention that for all those that join us this month, we will be having another draw. So every time you watch our webinar through the summer, you will gain a ballot every time you're in and watch it pretty much to the end. And it will be something that we'll do a draw at the end of the month. And one of you will get one of the SunPowerLED Ultimates. It has a $1,300 value. It's an excellent device for treating all sorts of things on the body using photobiomodulation. So we're just going to start in a moment here with a video. We will be having a question period for the latter half of the program tonight. And so please get ready with your questions. And I have some real good ones for Scott.
15 years back, I realized that light could make a huge difference on the body. I ended up designing this very powerful light using LED technology. With this amount of very high power density, it can reach through the tissues and travel right to the joints. But the key is that the power density and the area is extremely important to deliver that light into that. The mitochondria receives that light and converts that energy into the cell. So it's like giving the cells super high octane fuel, and they run like a jet, and they're able to do all the things for repair in that. What are the products we have? Well, we have a small device, which is actually large when it comes to light therapy. You have a fairly large area of light and a high power density that can be used for different parts of the body, like your finger, shoulder, back, neck, knees, ankle, anywhere on the body. And then we have what's called the mini canopy, which is about a foot square in size. And then we have our full-size canopy, which is basically 6 of the mini canopies. And then we have another device, which is the helmet, and that device can help for mental issues, for brain injuries, for concussions, for PTSD, TBI, all of those kinds of things. And there's new research out there that shows it could be helpful for not only strokes, but dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's, and just different brain issues. Our plans are to move this technology into every area of the world where there's pain and inflammation, which is basically everywhere, and to expand that so people understand all the applications where this technology can be used to help them in their health in the body as a wellness device. People are looking for how they can treat themselves without drugs.
Well, all right. So I started off to say that we have a special guest tonight, Scot Faulkner from West Virginia. And I'm sure you're going to really enjoy this program tonight. So we also have a little short video that I would like to play when it's ready, and might be a minute or two here. But it will really give you a little more background too of PBM. So as soon as that video is ready, folks, but in the meantime, Scott, if you can come on with your video, that'd be great.
There we are.
There we go. Excellent, excellent. Well, great having you on tonight, and this is special. So, Scott, how long is it now that you've been involved in photobiomodulation?
Since September of 2015.
Okay, that's a good stretch. I beat you just a little bit. It was back 2009, 2000. Hold it, yeah, 2009, 2010. In that somewhere around there is when I learned that light therapy could be beneficial. After I tried it on my back, I wouldn't have believed it, Scott. I don't know about you, but at first I didn't think that shining light on a person's knee or elbow was going to do anything, especially helping my back. It was every year, 2 years, because of an early injury. My back would be like on flames, and it was so much pain. And I had just done that. I think I mentioned to you, Scott, about using the red light for activating the drug for cancer work
Right.
that we were doing. It's still unfortunately in the research phase, but I thought, what if I did shine that light on my back? And I was going through excruciating pain, and like 20 minutes later, the significance of reduction of pain was just amazing. I couldn't believe it. I'm sure that you all have also. We got our video very shortly here, but I just explain a little bit about what your experience with photobiomodulation or red light therapy or cold level laser therapy or cold level light therapy or low level light therapy.
I still like PBM. I always tell people you can remember the acronym by saying it's Peanut Butter Morsels, PBM.
There you go.
So let me just start. 3 days ago, our 13-year-old red heeler dog was playing a little too hard with Vicky, and she sprained her right front leg and was in pain. And so we, instead of taking her to the vet because it was on the weekend, we immediately used your device and put it in 3 different places, 4 minutes in each place, and she's now running around without like nothing happened. And of course, in the veterinary world, we like to say that dogs and cats and other animals, because equine is a big one, they don't understand placebo effects. So either it worked or it didn't.
Right.
So your device went into action right around 6 o'clock on Sunday, and the dog is a happy dog.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. But you've also used it for your own purpose, for own things for yourself and your wife.
Oh, yeah. Well, probably the biggest reality check was in January of 2017 when Vicky fell and tore her left rotator cuff. And so she had only 60% range of motion and was getting cortisone shots for several months because of all the pain. And then she started using a PBM device, and within literally 4 weeks, 100% range of motion, no more pain, no more cortisone shots. So that was one of our big reality checks early on, that it's real deal stuff.
Yeah. Scott, right now, what I think we're going to do is we got that video ready. So if you want to turn off your video again, we're going to pop into this
All right.
Quick video here.
Red light therapy. It is truly revolutionizing healthcare, literally as we sit here right now. Red light therapy is saving a life. Red light therapy is improving a life. Somewhere in the world, military forces are using red light therapy in their conditioning. SEAL units, Special Forces for the United States Army, NATO pilots, Israeli Defense Forces. They're all incorporating red light therapy into their conditioning, into building endurance, recovery from their exercises, and improving their performance. At the same time, we have young people at places like St. Jude having their lives saved with treatments relating to taking care of the side effects of chemotherapy. Every major sports team in the world is now using red light therapy. Every NFL team has either a handheld or a light bed. Every NBA team, every World Cup soccer team, most collegiate athletic teams now are using red light therapy. It is truly the future of medicine, but it's actually becoming the present of medicine.
Well, Scott, that I still really like that video. It really does a good job of explaining all the different applications.
Very much.
Sorry, it tries to in 2 minutes. But from wound care to pain to inflammation, and it's been something else. So tell us a little more. Okay, so you learned about PBM, and when was it first with the PBM Foundation?
We actually, well, from the Optical Society of America held this 75-person, 10-nation PBM incubator in Washington, D.C. in September of 2015. That's where I was brought in by the Optical Society to organize and facilitate and keynote that 3-day retreat. And from there, everyone said, well, we really should be much more focused, because at that time it was basically just a grab bag of early adopters, entrepreneurs, a few regulators, but for the most part, it was a very unfocused movement. And then it took a couple years of emailing and conference calls and all that. And then finally, October 2017, the 18 of the sort of more senior players from the September 2015 meeting came out to Shepherd University. Once again, I organized it, facilitated it, chaired it. And at that time, they said, well, we have WALT and NALT, which are two organizations that do a very good job of curating research and bringing researchers together, but they were very inwardly focused. How do we outwardly focus to really get PBM as a mainstream medical device, medical procedure? And so at that time, the PBM Foundation was formed.
Okay. And how, now that organization has been formed, what are some of the developments over the last few years that have happened? And we're going to come right up to today's like the last little bit. And
Sure. Well, let's start first of all that in late August of this year, we're having the World Association of Laser Therapy, WALT, that's meeting in London. And this will be the 30th anniversary. So that means in 1994, a group of people came together, people like Mike Hamlin, who at that time was with Harvard, and others, and said, we need to take all this research that's flooding in from the Eastern Bloc, because, for those of you who don't know the history, a person by the name of Mester was a researcher in Budapest, Hungary. In 1968, he was looking at whether red ruby lasers caused cancer. He shaved a bunch of mice, put on the laser, and what happened was no cancer, but for those mice that got the laser treatment, tons of hair grew very fast. So we called it biostimulation at the time. And so over the years, behind the Iron Curtain, he developed all sorts of research and applications. And when the Berlin Wall fell in 89 and everything else started to fall into place in 90, in the early 90s, all of his research started coming into the West. And so it was Walt that realized that we need to organize this as more and more people began to look at it and do something with it. And the first group of people who really embraced it were dentists, because lasers were already part of the dental world for cutting and cauterizing. So it wasn't that much of a jump to start applying lasers for pain management. And then from there, the chiropractors got into it and started adding it to their buffet table of activities, and then the veterinarians. And so those were really the first three groups that started to do things. But then research started to flood into, again, thanks to Hamlin at Harvard and other places, we started creating research hubs. We started getting small entrepreneurial startups that started coming into the mix and starting applying it. And So now 30 years later, I mean, last year we were in India, had 500 people, 30 countries, and tons and tons of research shared. I mean, we are really coming of age. And probably the most incredible reality check for me, I mean, I go to these conferences of all sorts. I don't just do PBM conferences, I do general medical conferences, scientific conferences, specific conferences dealing with the military. And back on June 12th and 13th, we had 200 military officers, I mean, generals, colonels, lieutenant colonels, sergeant majors, a number of contractors, and then myself as the PBM Foundation, talking about war fighter effectiveness. It was actually called a Human Performance Conference. And for 2.5 days, you had all these people talking about how do we create conditioning routines for making sure that the frontline forces are healthy, are effective, and do not have any injuries. And several of them at that conference brought up PBM as part of their formal remarks. It blew me away. I mean, I go to these conferences, it's never brought up when I go up and show people my card. They go, what in the world's that? And I have to start from scratch. At this conference, several people, again, several of the speakers, as part of their formal remarks, as part of their slide deck, brought up PBM as an integral part of warfighter effectiveness and of military conditioning. And then several others talked about it in their informal remarks. It was wonderful to all of a sudden have this becoming a mainstream discussion at the highest military levels, focusing in this case on mostly the pre-treatment and the conditioning as opposed to injuries treatments. But we are really coming of age, and there's a lot of other indications in the last year, especially even since India, that are indications that we are really this movement is finally getting the traction that it's deserved all these years.
Yeah, it's still slow in adoption, but it's coming. It's happening better. I mean, more recently, one of the medical doctors I'm working with, his father had an injury, a problem in the hospital that happened between the surgical room and the OR and the recovery, and so he had problems with lack of oxygen, and he just got his finished his residency. He was all ready to get started, and he felt he was going to have some time to spend with his parents for a while before he got into getting his clinic going and everything. And well, he decided his father ended up with this injury because problem. He had a rod put in his neck, and everything went well with the surgery, but that afterwards, that accident with the lack of oxygen put his father in a vegetative state. So him as a medical doctor, and his forte, which he did a deep dive beforehand, was on rehab. So he really focused on brain and all sorts of things, dealing with rehab, getting people mobile again. And when this happened to his father, he decided, okay, I gotta just search everything I can possibly find about how he can improve the oxygen to his father's brain and help recovery. And he landed PBM, and he says, I cannot believe it. After all the learning he's gone through to get to this point, he did not know anything about PBM. And he did this massive dive. And well, the good thing about that massive dive is he started with PBM, another device first, because he didn't know about me, and it wasn't very long. He connected with Dr. Margaret Naser from the University of Boston, and she had mentioned about knowing me, and here we're almost next door to each other, and so he's searching the world and found me next door. So his father is already using this helmet in the ICU to try and help his father. So I mean, his son's like putting it on him and doing everything, because yet he's still in that vegetative, I don't know if they call it coma, vegetative, whatever, but state where he's non-responsive. But they're just starting to see some response now. So it's pretty exciting. But one that's more on the high activity level is, we both know somebody by the name of Ann Abernathy. Tell us about Ann.
So Ann Abernathy, who is one of the, an amazing individual. She was called Grandma Luge because she was for 6 Olympics, she was basically doing luge, and was one of the top luge people in the world, which is kind of wild because she's from the U.S. Virgin Islands. So just like we had the Jamaican bobsled team, we had the Virgin Islands luge team. And so she's in the Guinness Book of Records as having been the oldest Olympian. She's also in the Guinness Book of Records and being in the most Olympics. As she turned 71 earlier this year, a couple years ago, she decided to shift over to archery. And archery uses a lot of the same upper body muscles that luge does. So she immediately catapulted into the top tier of archery in the world. But literally now 2 years ago, she got COVID and got very bad brain fog in COVID, and had the pharmaceutical people given her the drugs that they said would help her get over the brain fog, she would have been drug screened out of Olympic competition and basically any world competition. She decided to become part of a clinical study on whether PBM would take care of brain fog. It brilliantly takes care of brain fog. And so that fundamental groundbreaking study was a success for her. She continues to use PBM both for not only for the continued mental clarity, but also for aging muscles and conditioning as part of her routine. She was the gold medalist #1 in the Pan Am Games. She was the #1 in the Asian Games, and she was the #1 in the Senior Games out in Utah this year. So she is one of the top tier in the world, and continues to use PBM to this day. So an amazing person. She lives near me out here in West Virginia, and will be my guest on July 4th, coming up in another 2 days. And she's just an amazing individual, but another perfect example of how PBM, unlike Big Pharma, PBM doesn't have the side effects, and in this case, has been blessed by the Olympics. I mean, going back to 2016, and Nike funded PBM devices for the U.S. track and field team. The International Olympic Committee basically ruled it as like another bucket of ice or a whirlpool bath, because they also saw it as a natural process. And therefore, the U.S. Olympic, especially the track team, won more medals than in any other Olympics that the U.S. track team had ever been involved with, because not only was it part of their conditioning, but the recovery between the different heats. And that's one of the key things. And we have a Dr. Bob Bowen, who's on our board of directors for the PBM Foundation. He's one of the top 200-meter over 70 runners in the world right now. He gets gold medals everywhere. And again, it's about the multiple heats that you finish a heat, then you have like 2 hours before the next heat. And so he uses PBM for that recovery period. And again, it's ruled as not performance enhancing drugs. Is ruled as again, using a whirlpool or a heat wrap or ice bucket. And so we're seeing athletes all over the world, in not only for the Olympics, but for every other kind of sport, using PBM because it is, again, that natural process, and it is reducing injuries for young athletes in the college level. It is reducing injuries for, athletes who are not professionals, like people like Bob Bowen. And then it's giving the competitive edge for all these major sports, NFL teams in America, World Cup soccer teams around the world. Ann Liebert, another one of our board members, is working on rugby teams in England and on what they call Australian football or footy down in Australia. Again, all these teams it's PBM is now a fundamental part of their conditioning routine.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and without side effects too. That's the beautiful thing. So, now I want you to share a little bit about something else that I'm going to roll into the picture here. This is our helmet that I was explaining that right now is in the ICU helping this brain recovery. But we've had it also involved in a study, and I'll mention that in a minute. There's the bright red, the 660 nanometer, and here's the near infrared, and you can just kind of see the little purplish dots in the video.
Exactly.
So the bright red doesn't penetrate as deep, but it's very beneficial to the blood. And then the near infrared is something that can go quite deep. So with a treatment of 1 minute of the red and 3 minutes of the near infrared, we've had some pretty neat outcomes on different people. It'd be kind of like taking one of these palm lights and putting it in 10 different locations over the whole brain. In this case, it's a lot faster for a clinic to do 10 all at the same time. So in a 4-minute treatment, we've been able to see success. I'll just mention one that really catches my attention that was so much fun to see is one of my friends had a stroke, and 2 minutes later, he finally tried the light and he put the helmet on, and he had a really bad slur, and you couldn't understand him on the phone. And we put the helmet on, and he did the 4-minute treatment, and the next day he could speak clearly. We've had concussions that have very quick turnaround, where double vision is gone within 2 days, and headaches, and just even within a week, several treatments. Amazingly great results as far as turning these people around. I mean, there's the research going on for TBI and dementia, Alzheimer's, all different kinds of brain injuries or brain problems of different kinds. But you're familiar with one just in your backyard at Shepherd's University with all of a sudden,
Dr. Jenny
I need
Flora.
the helmet. Sorry, Jenny Flora. Can you tell us about that particular
Sure, absolutely.
study? And that's with my helmet, so I'm pretty happy about this one.
One of the West Virginia, unfortunately, is number one in the United States in the number of percentage of people dying from opioid overdoses and the number of people addicted with opioid overdoses. We are the worst in the country per capita, and so it became a very important priority for Shepherd University, which is part of the WVU system, to begin looking at not just how PBM can help on pain management and therefore avoid opioids, but rather how do we take a person who is suffering from substance use disorder, opioid addiction, and does this help them basically replace the opioids, but also helps remove the cravings so that normal rehabilitation is sped up, and the success rate of normal rehabilitation is increased. And also the third most important thing, the potential of someone lapsing back to addiction is reduced. So that trifecta, which actually Dr. Schiffer from Harvard back about 4 years ago found this out in a similar study up in Wisconsin, but it had never been replicated. So Shepherd replicated it using Tom's device, and it was brilliant. It was huge. In fact, it actually exceeded what Schiffer did at Harvard. And so we had a big press conference back in March. We had the Attorney General and the state auditor who's running for Attorney General and the Attorney General who's running for governor, who were there to honor the results at Shepherd. Right now, the opioid class action suit, West Virginia is the first state to have completed the class action suit negotiations and out-of-court settlement. So we have like $4 billion in the state of West Virginia that's going to start to be allocated for various rehabilitation and mitigation and prevention programs. They are both committed, both the Attorney General, maybe Governor, and Auditor, maybe Attorney General, to using PBM because they don't want to just simply throw money at Narcan, EpiPens, and more policing. They really want to use things like PBM to really solve the opioid crisis in the state of West Virginia. So Jenny's work, Tom's device, is really leading the way in giving people hope where hope really what didn't exist. It's a fantastic, wonderful.
And this wasn't extensive treatments. This was treatments that were twice a week for 4 minutes.
Yes.
And can you share just a little bit of what they saw? Just.
I don't have the metrics at hand, but it has been a published paper, and it is just absolutely astounding what happened. Because once again, as an adjunct, not as a replacement, but as an adjunct to normal rehabilitation from substance use disorder, it sped the process, it increased the success of the process, and so far, as they've been doing monitoring, it has sustained the process. And so that trifecta gives us all hope for solving the opioid problem in this country.
Now, some will be asking me about the publishing of that study. It's gone through some, as I understand, it's gone through some reviews, and it's just about ready to go out there, right?
Right. Again, at our press conference back in March, she did have a fact sheet that went out that showed some of the metrics, but again, I don't have my fingertips. But it was, I said, it even was more impressive results than what Schiffer did 4 years ago.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And with the PBM Foundation in London coming up in August, people will be able to tune into that. There will be a cost to tune in. I'm not sure what it is, but there's going to be 3 days of intensive people speaking on all different kinds of applications of PBM and some of the research that's going on, or a lot of research that's going on. And I'm kind of happy to say I'll be there because I'm going to be presenting information on how light can get through. Even in this case, we did a special application with a very special instrument called a spherical culminator, which only lets light through the top hole. It's a round ball, kind of picture an exercise ball. And it's totally reflective inside, very scattering. It scatters the light, but it's very reflective. It's not a shiny silver surface like a mirror. It is actually white. It's very diffused. But what happens is a sensor goes into the side of this ball, and then you read what it measures, and it doesn't matter what kind of beam parameters you're looking at, whether it's a culminated beam from a laser or whether it's an LED device, it measures the exact amount that comes into the ball. So what we did is we measured, first of all, just the power of a laser compared to our palm device, and we were able to measure optical watts of power, how much optical power was just going into the ball from the device. And then we put one steak, big steak that we bought, one steak, and it was 2 steaks thick, and then 3 steaks thick, and saw how much light went through, how much light energy would penetrate through 3 steaks. So that's kind of like if you're trying to penetrate your shoulder, depending on how big you are, you might have to go through 1 steak, you might have to go through 2 steaks, you might have to go through 3 steaks, kind of as far as tissue wise. And the whole idea is, okay, how much light is getting through? And does it matter whether the light source is laser or whether it's LED? And we did it for not only steak, but we did it for chicken, and we did it for pork. Now, it's very difficult to get a live animal to place it on top of this ball. So we had to go with grocery store steak and pork chop, and so it didn't have the blood flow through it. But the whole idea is what's happening through the rest of the tissue, and we were able to measure the light coming through. And the fascinating part was that it didn't matter if we started off with a 5-watt optical laser at 1064 nanometer, and we compared it to our 5-watt palm light, that we had the same amount of energy going through 1 steak, 2 steak, or 3 steaks, or whether it was pork or whether it was chicken. It didn't matter. It was exactly the same amount of energy going, light coming through all that tissue that was coming out of the tissue after passing through that much tissue. So that's pretty revolutionary as far as getting a real good, accurate measurement on this. And I've seen some stuff from a long time ago, but nobody has kind of put it together this way. And we even put 2 different sensors inside so we could make sure that the sensors and a calibrator and different things to make sure that there was no mistakes in how we were measuring things. And we were able to see this very nicely. And it didn't matter whether the beam from the laser was a culminated beam, so it was just a sharp dot of light, like let's see, there you go, sharp dot of light like this, or whether it was diffused through a diffuser tip. Didn't matter. It was how much power was available on the surface of that steak and how much ended up going through. And so the only real difference between the lasers and our LED devices, you probably have to spend anywhere from 10 to 30 times more for the lasers. So this is something now you can get in home use, and that's the idea. So not only people like Scott, but other people going through day-to-day lives, having blue-collar income, white-collar income, doesn't matter. This is something that starts becoming affordable. And how much better could it be if you sprain your ankle or you do some kind of injury and you got an infection, you've got something going on that you couldn't start already treating it right away at home, like out of your first aid kit. I think that's where the biggest advantage going forward will be, as people can do this more on a home use when the medical system is stressed out with the requirements going on, that this helps people to look after their health themselves. Can you comment a little bit to that?
Sure. Actually, on a number of fronts. So let's first of all say that everyone knows in the computer world you have Moore's Law. And Moore's Law has been helping PBM. The devices are getting simpler. They're getting more powerful. They're getting cheaper. And that's definitely the case in terms of when you start to realize that even 5 years ago, people had to go to clinics to get PBM treatments. And now, especially within the veterans hospital system, the devices have become so simplified, especially like Tom's device, where you have, it's got internal timers and things, that they're handing out these devices, PBM devices, to veterans to take back home. In places like Denver, Salt Lake City in particular, that you've got people who are maybe traveling half a day to come to a veterans hospital. Now they can be handed a device and go home and not have to keep coming into the clinic. This is a huge, home use is a huge future, and is actually a huge present right now within, especially the veterans system. The other pieces of the puzzle is that because these devices are becoming more simplified to use, and also they're shifting to LEDs. Again, 5-10 years ago, when you had lasers, they had to be only used by technicians and by doctors. Each state in the United States had very different regulations. Some are very strict. And so once again, we're back to the issue of availability and accessibility. And it's so having LED lights, having simplified devices and cheaper devices, the availability is becoming literally exponentially expanding versus where we were just a few years ago. That's a huge, huge jump in the right direction.
Now, there's also what would be helpful to our listeners is there's the area of, well, let me just find out what the cheapest thing going on Amazon is that has some LEDs in it,
Yeah, they're
compared
they're
to,
they're under $100 now, and again, sometimes you get what you pay for. They're Chinese knockoffs, which means that they don't work. They overpromise, underdeliver. They break down. Um, but there are a few devices out there that are will give you some PBM experience, but certainly nothing like I like to say there's the consumer devices and the medical devices. And when you start to look at consumer devices, again, you get what you pay for. But the uh, but what's sort of been an interesting part to this is that when you type in red light therapy device as opposed to photobiomodulation, more and more people are becoming aware of it. They're realizing that light has a role to play in one's health
Mhm.
and in one's healing. And that so even though these are knockoffs, even though a lot of them are disappointing devices, it is raising awareness that light does have a role to play in one's health, wellness,
Yep.
and healing. And that's a huge jump right there.
Yeah, and yeah, if you want to grow some hair, it doesn't take too much power to go into the very surface of the scalp
And the
with light.
cosmetic,
So
there's a lot of people who there's now masks that help with this crow's feet and a few other things. So
yeah, so
again,
you
for
can
people
do
who are
that.
looking at that, now if you got a serious medical condition, you definitely want to go with a medical device.
Yeah, you need the power, you need the concentration, the power density to get deeper in to accomplish the task. Otherwise, you're just playing with light on the surface again, and
Right.
maybe you have to treat a half a day to get the same result. I don't, but that kind of comparison. I did point this out to somebody drew it out of me. Actually, I said, "How can you best describe the difference of the light?" And it just came to me, and I think this is one that might be used going forward. Is it's kind of like if you were to go, we have the optical power of beyond 100 milliwatts per square centimeter. So we're 150 milliwatts per square centimeter, 180 milliwatts per square centimeter, 100 milliwatts. We're in that range of 100 to 200 milliwatts per square centimeter.
Mhm.
The sun's rays, if you are out on the sunny beach during the summer and the sunlight is coming at you fairly directly, you're looking at about 100 milliwatts per square centimeter. But that's all the wavelengths combined. That's
Right.
the some UV, some blue, some green, yellow, red, near infrared, and far infrared. That's the whole band,
Mhm.
giving you 100 milliwatts per square centimeter. It's a given. That's what's coming down to the earth at the
Mhm.
perpendicular. But we're providing, let's say, 100 milliwatts or above, all into just the red spectrum, which already starts penetrating very deep. And then
Mhm.
you go over to the near infrared, which starts becoming invisible to your
Mhm.
eye. It doesn't even look very bright, but the near infrared, and then going a little further, you go into the 10,000 nanometer,
Mhm.
1064 nanometer, 1050 nanometer, and it's
Mhm.
totally invisible to your eye, but it even has that possibility going just a little bit deeper yet. So you have all of the power, and that's what we do anyways on our devices, is you switch it to one wavelength, you'll get over 100 milliwatts on that wavelength. We're not mixing it amongst all these different wavelengths. If a person
Mhm.
wants to get 810 nanometer, we got 150 milliwatts per square centimeter in that narrow band. All so it's 1.5 times the sun, and then even up to the 1050 nanometer. So the not only is it all condensed in that one region, but when you go out on the beach and you feel that just beautiful sun feeling, just that nice penetrating warmth. Some of it's not penetrating very far; it's just heating up the surface
Mhm.
skin, especially when it gets down to the UV spectrum. It's just very, very shallow. It gives you great vitamin D. Well, compare the feeling that you would get if you went out on a 12 o'clock sun, or you tried to do that at 7, 6, 6 o'clock or
Right.
6:30
Mhm.
in the evening. which one do you think might have more of an impact on your life? It'll be out when you're out on high noon. Now, can you still have something at 2 o'clock? Sure, absolutely. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, it starts to wane significantly till the time you get to 6, 7 o'clock. And I think some units are close to midnight. They're not worth the postage to get them.
Exactly.
But
when I talk
we're in that medical space where it's 12 o'clock noon sun
exactly.
kind of thing, without the damaging rays, by the way. I use that comparison, but I would like to say too, some ask, and we'll get into some questions. So start rounding up your questions. I'm going to do a quick little show of the product here, but I do want to say, Scott, you've been all over. Have you seen any signs on the beach that says no sunbathing here or you'll go blind?
Right, exactly.
There isn't a sign like that.
No, only during the eclipse did they say don't stare at the sun back then. But that
stare at the sun, right? Because your pupils are very large, number one, and number two, you're focused in such a way that the UV can get to the back of the eye and start doing some thermal damage. But when you're out sunbathing and you have 100 milliwatts per square centimeter coming at you, you have your eyelids closed. You don't keep your eyelids open. And you can do that for hours and not damage your eyes. And the same thing with this. Lasers, it's a different story. You've got that beam that can hit the back of the retina. So I'm not suggesting to anybody that you wouldn't use some kind of glasses. But when it comes to LEDs, the LED light is so diffused, it's extremely safe. So if I do this if I do this as an LED, it spreads out more and more to a bigger area. So very quickly, it's very diffused. So there's no hot spots on the back of the eye. So LEDs, even a quick look at LEDs, even if they're very bright, it's not going to be damaging to the eyes. Do I suggest anybody to stare at their LED for a long time? No, that's not at all what I'm suggesting. But to treat themselves on their face, they can close their eyelids and they'll be just as safe as sunbathing. And you're not going to be doing this for 2 hours with the light on. Our treatments are down to a couple minutes to 5 minutes to 10 minutes. And maybe you could comment on, it's mentioned on the PBM Foundation website as far as how the FDA sees the safety of PBM therapy.
Yeah, once again, they've declared it completely safe. And so that's why, and so pretty much every FDA, PBM device is now got expedited clearances within FDA. And there's a lot of, because you have a number of predicate devices, a lot of people just basically say my device is like that device, and they just go straight through, don't even have to go through the hoops of FDA because it's considered so safe. And one of our challenges from the PBM Foundation and movement in general is that the indications for use are still fairly narrowly defined within the FDA. Basically, it's just for general wellness and increasing blood flow. We really want to start to get more and more indications for use for some of these specific conditions, whether it's the neurological. One of the sessions I'll be chairing in London is on the ophthalmological side, because treating age-related macular degeneration is huge, and people like Clark Tedford are really slogging through the FDA to try to get a formal indications for use for PBM for treating dry macular degeneration. Yeah. And so I'm hoping to get a great update from him when we're all in London. So there's a lot of progress. There's still more progress to come. Yeah.
Well, Scott, what I'd like you to do is just for a moment, if you can turn off your video, I'm going to just do a quick advertisement here for our products, just for those that haven't seen our products. So here, I'll just introduce a few. I've actually been involved in PBM going back as far as over 15 years now. That's closer to 16. This being one of my first big clunky units, but it worked extremely well for treating different things. So I've been able to see for the last 16 years how PBM can be very, very beneficial. In the last 4 years, I developed the different LED devices that you're going to see right now. This happens to be one of our devices. We have the Palm Professional, we have the Ultimate, and then we have the Super Palm. Now the Professional is a slightly less power than the Ultimate. It has the 660 nanometer and it has the 810 nanometer, this other wavelength, okay? Doesn't look very bright at all because it's pretty much invisible. Most of the energy coming off of this is something that you don't see. But we have the Professional, and then we have the Ultimate, which is, as I said, just like 25% more power. And just to give you an idea what it looks like, I'll just show you this way. You can see the light going right through my hand here, right here. And if I move my fingers around here and just make the skin a little thinner, you can actually see the light. My knuckles are way up here, so you can see how it's going right through. It doesn't have any problem going through the fingers. But that's the kind of light level that you would see at 660 nanometer. And then when it comes to 810 nanometer, if this camera here could pick it up, you would see this even more coming out of my hand, more of this whole hand area being illuminated with that. So that's coming through. So because it's got more energy coming through, but you can't see it very well. You can just see these little purplish dots. So that's the Ultimate. And then we have what we call the Super Palm, which is our latest model for the last just going over a year. And we have the 660, the same power level as you saw with the Ultimate, only when you switch it to the other wavelength, instead of the 810 nanometer, we have 1050. Now what we do is you would not be able to see it. So we put a little red indicator light right here. But when the camera will actually show the other wavelength, but it's totally invisible to me. I can't tell it. Those other purplish dots are there. It's only purple because that's the way the camera picks it up. Otherwise it would be really in the red spectrum. So those are the three main lights that we work with. And we also have people with oral issues. And I'm just going to look for it. It's right here. Okay. I know I'm probably looking right at it here. Oh, here it is. There you go. So this is a device we add that can be added to our Professional, Ultimate, or Super Palm. And what it does is it collects the light of the wavelength that you're interested in and directs one of those wavelengths down the tube, so you can actually see it coming out of the end. So this can go inside the mouth and put the light right inside the mouth on the area there. So we do have this probe attachment that can be used. It's a separate accessory, but if somebody wants to get that. One other thing I'll mention is just that you notice the knobs, the bumps on here. That is to keep our light at a distance away from the actual LEDs. You can still touch this, but the idea is we want to keep the skin cool enough because we got a lot of energy going in. And what happens is this spacing allows for airflow. So a little bit of convection coming through keeps everything at a nice temperature. So that's why we have this knobby, we call it the knobby ring. We do have patent pendings on these devices because of the way we cool them. And that's the way we can get the power density. If you go to SunPowerLED.com and go to the research page, you can find a comparison for competitors and see why is our device more expensive than some others, and it explains how the power density is so critical to getting in deeper. And so we have come up with a new term, is LEDs per 100 square centimeters, and that's 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters or 4 inches by 4 inches. So if you took an area of 4 inches by 4 inches, with this type of density, how many LEDs would be in that area? And so we would have like 27 high power LEDs in that area, where some of the other manufacturers are like 2 LEDs, 4 LEDs. So it's a big difference. And, you know, where the LEDs are spaced so far apart that you're not getting the power density. Earlier I showed the helmet, but here's the mini canopy. We have this device, plus we have what's called the full out canopy, which is a 2x3 matrix of these, and it's 6 of these devices. So there you have the 660 nanometer and the 810 nanometer. And again, it's hard to see, but there's the little purplish dots that you see coming out in the 810, and then we, on special order, we can provide the 1050 as well. Did show the helmet a little earlier. There's the helmet, and that has basically 10 of the palm lights all the way around, in covering the whole head. And so this is I believe, unless somebody can correct me, I know all the different devices out there, this is the most powerful helmet on the planet right now with the 660 nanometer, and you feel a beautiful warmth. It's delivering 25 joules every second into the brain, which is quite considerable. And then we have the 810 nanometer as well, and you can kind of see that there, and you feel that same warmth. So that's our product lineup. We have some other things that are undergoing research. Scott had in the video that you saw earlier with Scott, he talked about St. Jude's, and they've shown that light therapy in the mouth during chemotherapy treatment can be significantly reduce or totally eliminate a lot of the side effects of chemotherapy inside the mouth, and that allows them to continue the chemotherapy without ending up on a feeding tube and some of the other very, very terrible side effects that can come along. Scott, if you'd like to come back on, we'd like to answer a few questions that we've got coming through. I'm sure there's a lot more, but we'll try and get to a few. We're running a little later. We had some great conversation here, so I will try and answer some of these questions. Any experience or PBM as an aid of treating fibromyalgia? Can you mention something about or would you like to mention something about fibromyalgia being one of those crazy things? It's all sorts
Yeah, I mean, it's usually the overall light beds that are helpful on that. But again, it's more anecdotal. There's not been any formal clinical studies that I know of.
Yes. Exactly. And it was really, really neat to hear today. And all of what I'm talking about is anecdotal, because there needs to be more research. And I'm so thankful to the study that was done for the helmet in West Virginia with Jenny Flora. But it helps on so many different applications. And we hope that some will come to I'd really like to see the use of a study being done on myocarditis, as kids are having trouble with myocarditis. So if there's somebody out there that really wants to see that move forward and they have financial abilities to help, we would love to see a myocarditis study take place. There are some that I've contacted that are interested. It's just that to try and do these studies, it does take money to do it. Nancy, thank you, Nancy. First of all, thank you, Gail, for your question. And Nancy said that it cured her brain fog in 3 to 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it is amazing how fast the light can make a difference on the brain. It's really fascinating. So, good question. Here's another question by Susan. Susan is asking, would I need the helmet for a treatment for brain fog, or can I use the super palm? And I can tell you that although the helmet is really nice because it does the whole brain in 4 minutes, you've done the treatment. But a person can definitely use the super palm over the area of the, like in kind of like 10 places around the brain, and be able to help that way. But as well, some of the research that came out of West Virginia was that even treatment under one of our larger devices or a bed, a light bed, can actually help with brain fog, even if you're not directly treating the brain itself, right? Scott, there was the one study that Dr. Praveen Irani was involved in, and Dr. Bowen there, that showed that it could help, whether it was a helmet version of some kind or whether it was a more overall. I think I mean, to get the energy in the brain, helmet could do it a little faster for sure, I think anyways, but hopefully that answers your question. Susan came back and said also, that is awesome, read the opiate treatments. Yeah, to see these people having hope, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
it's just like, it just sucks you, right? You know, when you go through these conditions, and so many people end up on these opiates because of pain. Well, why not get rid of their pain so they don't have to use opiates, right?
Well, actually, this goes back a year ago, that after several years, the Center for Disease Control in America has opioid prescription guidelines that go back to 2016. Last February 2023, they issued a updated set of opioid prescription guidelines, and after about 8 different testimonies that I presented, they said PBM is the only alternative to pain management, and so that they actually, as part of their opioid prescription guidelines, they actually said, before you prescribe opioids for pain management, use PBM. I mean, that was a huge breakthrough. So we have an official government agency, the CDC, that came forward and said PBM is the best way to avoid using opioids in the first place.
So we got people asking about getting some information on that study, so we will get it along.
And I'll send it to you.
What is the best, Christine is asking, what is the best power to use for the lungs? Now, interesting enough, Scott remembers when I had, because I called him, let him know, but I not only had double lung pneumonia, which was really bad. My blood oxygen was hovering around 80%.
Ooh, that's bad.
Yeah, but also my brain function was really poor. I couldn't finish a sentence. I remember at one point I was struggling to get, I had to get a quotation out to for my device, the Canopy, the large device. And usually something that would have taken me a half an hour to 45 minutes. I was struggling all day long and into the next day just to try and put a few numbers and a couple pictures on. It was bad. I don't know if you remember, but I know Bob remembers, Bob Bowen, Dr. Bob Bowen remembers when I called him and I said, look, every time I'm using the mini Canopy on my lungs, my oxygen level was moving up, and then it would start to fade, and then I'd do another light treatment. So I would do 10 minutes of this on my front of my lungs with 810 nanometer and 10 minutes on the back. Now this is literally 15 of these palm lights in area and palm and power. So 15 times the power spread over 15 times the area. So it ends up being extremely close to the power of this. So it is possible to use the palm light on your lungs. And as a matter of fact, we had a guest on, if anybody's interested in listening about how this can make a difference on their lungs, tune in to one of our webinars from I'm going to say it's about a month ago, where we had Neil Boron on, and he talked about, well, actually, there's an older audio recording that I know it's up. I think we had a little challenge with that one, but he was struggling with an oxygen bottle with a blood oxygen of 80 as well. He had actually had the COVID a little bit before me, about a few weeks before I had, and 2 weeks, I guess it was. And he was still on an oxygen bottle where I was improving. He was a talk show host, and he couldn't work. So he was at home with the oxygen bottle, and they would be on and off. And they said at the time there was no possibility for any help from the hospital for with his oxygen, his condition. And so when I found out about his condition, somebody asked for prayer on the radio and for his father. And I thought, well, I got to get him a palm light. So we did. And within days of using it, his lung oxygen improved, and he very quickly recovered. But he was flatlining. He was not making any improvement. He says, I could breathe deeply, but it wouldn't, just the oxygen just wouldn't go into my lungs. It wouldn't do anything.
Right.
And so he had tremendous improvement. For my own condition, I had, in 2.5 weeks in, I ended up having so much, I started coughing so bad, I thought, oh no, I must be getting worse. That's what went through my mind. Well, I went into the hospital to emerge, and I had them do x-rays again. And they did the blood and everything. They said, your heart's good, your blood is good, but your lungs, they're exceptional. Well, I've been using the light. So that was what happened. But at the same time, I talked to Dr. Bowen, and I said, look, I've been doing this with my lungs. And he asked me the question, how are you treating your brain? And I says, I'm not. But I probably said that, tried to say that in 4 or 5 sentences, but I couldn't get it out. I was so bad in my verbal ability, even though my oxygen level had improved. I had such bad brain fog. And he says, Tom, you need to start treating your brain. So I had the mini canopy, so I started using that specifically on my brain. I already had such good success with my lungs, so I used this on my brain just because so I could do it, this side, that side. Mm-hmm. And because I saw what an improvement, how fast my brain started coming around. I mean, I could look at, before all this happened, I could look at a table of numbers and see the graph without even plotting it. And I couldn't add 3 numbers together during this time. My brain was really had it, but I then decided that's where the helmet needs to come in. And I built the helmet because I felt that so many other people could benefit from this. I think we're gonna go for a few more minutes. We got, if you don't mind, Scott, do you have a little more time?
Oh, absolutely. For you all.
Okay, because we've got a lot of questions. Okay, I got a question. Handheld versus small panel versus whole body treatment. Hard to justify cost of a whole body, even through fibromyalgia is a whole body pain problem. You're right, and that might be that if you can find a location that has a larger panel, a treatment center where you can go in, and there is going to be costs associated with getting the treatments, but it's something that, might have to get one. That's even a mini canopy to treat different areas.
Well, I think at the end of that, Tom, is that a lot of people are experimenting with flexible panels now. They're looking at wraps, they're looking at mats, they're looking even at sleeping bags. And so what they're doing is they're still having problems with some of the heat that's generated when you don't have the same structure, but you only have a fabric around it. But they are looking at other delivery mechanisms to get to the whole body, or get to let's say you have a tennis elbow or a bad knee. Instead of trying to use a fixed surface, how do you wrap something around that part of the body? So there's a lot of experimentation going on out there as people are finding different ways to deliver PBM.
Yep. Question, any success with treating trigger finger for Jill? Yes, we've seen beautiful results for trigger finger. And that would be a case of treating the palm area and the tendons down through here.
Part of that gets back to Ann Abernathy. She's had trigger finger issues, and so she's using your device for her arrow release.
Yeah, it's amazing. She was pulling the arrow. If you can imagine, it's 40-pound pull or 42-pound pull on this thing, and she does like 300 of those a day in her practice. I think I'd be walking around like this for the rest of the day.
Well, also for people who are not familiar with world-class archery competition, she is shooting 70 meters, which is almost a full football field, to hit a dime. And then and the difference between a gold medal and not medaling at all is literally what part of that dime you're hitting. If you hit the center of the dime, you get a gold medal. If you're off just literally a millimeter, you're bronze or not even in the competition. So you're shooting 70 meters to a dime. That's the kind of competition we're talking about here, which is mind-blowing.
Tears in ligaments, definitely it takes time to heal, but it's possible. I know that somebody actually, there was a significant tear in their ACL area, and it took them like months of treatment, but they were able to help that tear turn around. So it's possible to do that. Kyle is asking, could this help with GI issues like Crohn's? Just your thoughts, since you've...
There's a number of European companies that are now looking at how do you attach PBM to catheters to start to try to get deeper into different internal organs. Some of them are still only in animal tests. So there's a lot of looking at the different types of diseases and things that.
Yeah, and I come back to if you have enough energy and you have a little bit of time on your hands, I've seen different gut issues being helped with PBM. It's because even if you're not going all the way there, you're influencing the blood. So Neil, I got a comment here. Neil Boron's interview was in December 7th, 2023. So if you want to look that up. Okay. And we're getting down to the end of the questions here.
Well, let me also talk about the gut that Ann Lee, who's doing she's probably one of the top PBM researchers in the area of Parkinson's, that she's found that that you're not just treating PBM on the head, but you're treating PBM in the abdomen, that the microbiome that's being stimulated and improved by PBM down below is helping the neurological side. So she's doing some major breakthrough research in how the microbiome and PBM treating that has neurological applications.
Got a question that you could probably help with on the U.S. side of things. What about insurance companies? What are they doing with this?
Private insurance is almost non-existent. It's still for pay for play. About now 2/3 of the Blue Cross affiliates, there's 34 of them total. I think it's up to about 20 now. Will cover oral mucositis and preventative treatments. So, but otherwise, they still aren't covering anything else. Also, Kaiser Permanente is doing some initial indications also on, and some on pain management, but we're still very early on getting private insurers. Medicare is also open to looking at it, but we need to have a company go in and basically run the traps on behalf. Now, what's interesting is on Medicare is that some of these uh, cash and cash only practices don't want Medicare coverage because that'll actually reduce their revenue. So there's a lot of trade-offs as we try to make this thing mainstream.
Okay. There's other questions here. I know we're way over in time, and I'm very thankful, but I'll just say, if you would like to forward us the questions by email, if there's questions here for Scott, I'm sure you would be willing, Scott, if we sent you an
Sure.
email to answer
Absolutely.
one of these questions, because otherwise, we've got a great group of people here that are asking lots and lots of questions. And I think we don't want to go for till midnight. I think we did have planned that we'd be finished at 8 o'clock, and here it is 15 after. So, Scott, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been
Always a pleasure.
really, really good. And I think it's been an eye-opener to some who have joined us. And we have people, like, if you want to throw in your quick chat where you're watching from, but I know I've been able to go after the fact and look, and we've got people from Taiwan, from even some real committed people from India, which is a full 12-hour flip, and we got California, Alaska, Colombia, Florida, Kirkland, Washington. Yeah, there's, and I know only a small amount of you are responding, but Gainesville, Colorado, fantastic to hear all the people out there that are learning about this and taking it another step forward. And I got to say, tell your neighbors about, this, tell your friends about this, and please join us, and please visit the organization Scott mentioned, the PBM Foundation.org. That's a link on our website anyways, on the research page, but PBM Foundation.org got some great information there. It's just great to see everyone who's joining us from all over, and spread the word, because people probably won't hear about this from their doctor yet for a long time. But there are some that are starting to learn. So anyways, thank you again, Scott, for the great evening, and goodbye to everyone. And I hope you have a rich, blessed week this week.
And
Bye for
happy
now.
4th for the Americans.
Yep. Okay. Happy 4th. Bye for now.